Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on the Condo Pivot to Rental Apartments. I'm Rod Schulhauser, the COO here at Rock Advisors, and I got special guests for you. We got some great content about to happen for you. But before we kick things off, we always get lots of questions. So here's what's coming up in the near future. If you're interested in some webinars, some interesting topics, the one of taxes, the one we all love, but apartment municipal taxes. We've got two experts in the space, and very, very important, as we know, when it comes to the expense line of rental apartment projects. Estate freezes for multi-generational families. We have a tax strategies session with Trevor Perry that it will be in November. And of course, we're going to culminate the year, and this is going to be a very timely event, December 2nd at the Toronto Real Estate Forum. This is our annual apartment development and affordable housing live event at the Toronto Convention Center. And why it's so important is we all know that mid-October to late October is going to be the federal budget, and we are anticipating, and we're hearing firsthand, there's going to be a big housing component there, and of course, a focus, as we heard during election, on the apartment space, and that's also why you've probably seen Derek involved with the National Apartment Council. They've begun, and we've already started meetings with the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Housing coming up. And so we know what's coming. And all I can say is that that's going to play out very, very well compared to where we are today. And, it couldn't be better timing as well. We kick off every new year with the Apartment Development Masterclass. This is an 11 session, 2 hours a session, basically apartment development 101. So great for a lot of our clients, use it for onboarding staff. Of course, a lot of developers use it to get up to speed with the latest and greatest on everything from financing, design, and pro formas. It is quite a comprehensive course. Now, for today, we are going to be interactive. We've got a couple speakers going to be sharing, and you can use the chat box, you can use the Q&A, or if time permits, we plan on having a Q&A session at the end, but we may answer some on the fly if you put them in the chat box, and we will certainly address those. Also, for those that are asking, if you're looking for, or even for those people that have registered but were not able to join us live, we will make the recording available. It'll be on the landing page. All registrants will receive an email with all those particulars, and then you'll be sure to not miss anything, or if you wish to revisit anything. Today, we're going to cover these points, but centered to the conversation, it's all about pivoting from, the struggling condo space that unfortunately has been really hit here over the last little while. But many developers have already looked at rental apartments. We know all that. And, we make one simple assumption. It's this, is that, developers in any class, they know how to develop. They may know 90% of the equation already. Condo developers certainly know how to develop and build a building. But it's that extra 10% that we're going to talk about today. Like, what's different? What should I be considering? The finances, the design, all these various elements. And, we've got a special guest here, Mansour Kazarini, the Global Director of Architecture and Urbanism at Arcadis. And Mansour, why don't you just hop on, say hi, and then I'll take over and we'll just get started. But welcome and thank you for joining us, Mansour.
Thanks for having me, Rod. Hi, everyone. You've already heard the intro. Just saying hello and looking forward to this conversation.
Right. Well, let's hop right in. And the idea here again, for those condo developers that are here on this webinar, we know that you know how to develop. We know that you understand there are nuances and differences between the two. And our objective, really, if I had to give you two big buckets, it's these two things. Number one is we want to give you those nitty gritties, like put all those topics in front of you. You may have already gathered one, but hopefully you leave here having gained a nugget that's going to help you. It's a nugget that's going to cause you to think, and maybe it's going to open a door for you. And then the second bucket is going to be a place to go, or places to go, where you can get follow-up resources. You need more detail on this because you're at a certain stage in your project at the front end or the middle. And those are really what the two objectives are. Now, that being said, this is the real estate cycle. We've lived through many of these already, and we've got an Ontario arrow there, which is in one location. Maybe an Alberta arrow would be in a different spot. It probably would be pointing up the upper side of that slope. But suffice it to say that here in Ontario, we've come off a really good time, but for a number of months, a number of years now, really we're at that bottom. And I like to think of that bottom as almost being a big pause button, because it's not because people don't have land or people don't have money or people don't know what to do. It's in pause because there's just so many questions to be answered. What's the new government going to do? What's going to happen with interest rates? What's going to happen with the general economy, tariffs, and everything else? And so we know what that cycle is. And I guess the good news would be there's nowhere else to go but up. And that's definitely what today is going to be about. And we hope that that will shed some light, and this will shed some light on it. So I guess this is the slide of the day, which is condo does not equal rental. There's going to be a number of areas there, condos and development, condo development and rental apartments, basically have similarities, but we're not going to focus there. Our lens on this is really to make you aware that there are people ahead of you, meaning that there are people that have been developing apartments, designed apartments for many years, decades, and why not learn from their wisdom? The way I've always looked at it, wisdom comes in two forms. You learn from your own mistakes, or you can learn from the mistakes of others. And so we're going to try and tap you into that wisdom and really address some of those buckets. And Mansour is really going to be diving into design details, actual case studies and examples too, that will really hone in on where we're going from here. Now, of course, one of the big areas is finance. It's probably the most important one from a lot of development perspectives. How do we measure profit? These are the four metrics that dominate the rental apartment space. And a lot of these apply to, the condo development space, but there are clear differences when you're putting all your money in upfront versus you're selling upfront and then building from that perspective. But margin, internal rate of returns, equity multiples, and yield spreads are definitely metrics that as you're working with CMHC financing, as you're working with financial providers and putting together a capital stack, these all become things and questions that need to have solid answers for. And probably for you as a developer, you want to have confidence in and you want to have certainty in your analysis and have different scenarios pre-thought of before realities kick in. And I guess another way that I know Derek, he constructed this because it probably is a good representation of what's happened in rental apartment space since 2010. If you look at this graph in the yellow section from 2010 to 2021, those are the golden years because pretty much anyone who attempted and put a shovel in the ground and built a rental apartment, it was pretty tough to fail. There's a high likelihood of having great success in those years. It was great. COVID hits and even the apartment space still had an upward trend. We call it the COVID fog because there was still uncertainty as to what it was going to be like coming out the other end. But when interest rates did their thing in 22, halfway through that year, that's when everything changed. That's the day the music died, and when things took the downward spiral into all the way into 2024. Here we are today. Maybe we don't have that downward trajectory as much, but again, that big pause button, it's been pushed. But and we've got a lot of excitement about the future because we think that these are disruption years for the next 3 or 4 years, where really some people may think that things stay the same if nothing happens, but we like what we're seeing so far on some of the upcoming policies and really topics that the government seems to be interested in. And again, Derek with the National Apartment Council, they're getting into conversations with them. And all I can say is that there's some positive things that we have the right to, and we should feel that there is going to be an apartment boom coming in the coming years. So I think the history's told us that apartments are a very safe space and a great place to build and are less cyclical than a lot of other asset classes. But this is our personal viewpoint. This is Derek's viewpoint on what is going to be transpiring and what we're working towards as well. Now let's talk about you, the condo developer. There are other scenarios, but maybe these are three scenarios, and maybe you fit into one of these. And the first one, you have nothing under construction, but you've got land. You're poised, you're ready, you've got land. Now you just need a game plan. Number two, you could already have a condo building or a number of buildings under constructions in different phases of construction and completion. Or third, you may even have a multi-phase site that started. Maybe one building of three is already underway, and maybe there's a podium, maybe there's not a podium, maybe it's three separate. But you have closing worries, and there's different concerns because of what's transpired in the condo space. So these become real scenarios, and I know that when Mansour gets into his part, he'll talk about some of these scenarios with real examples to just show you what some of the thinking processes could actually look like. Now, a little while ago, I think it was about a year and a half ago, Mansour and Derek and a couple others, they ran a very similar condo deep dive webinar. And this really was the synopsis of it. And I'm not going to read it out and I'm not going to go into details, but suffice it to say that the condo developers has a certain way of thinking in these six big buckets. The buckets being the developer objectives, the financials, the unit mix and size, the design aspects, the differences in amenities, and how sales transpire. And these are the six big ones that we think have to be crystal clear when you start that transition and when you look at the game plan for becoming an apartment developer. And I know Mansoor is going to talk a little bit about financing as well. And I'm just going to just talk about that for a little bit before we transition into some, where should I go for some more information. But in the financials, I mean, this is the obvious big differentiator. It's far different when you have a pre-sale model versus a pay for it all upfront model, developing a capital stack, building it before you make your first dime. And of course, that whole exercise of developing that pro forma, the cash flows, stress testing that pro forma to account for variations in various things of taxes, of interest rates. Those what if scenarios are very, very important when it comes to putting the financials together. Now, I do know that Mansoor will also touch on this. He's got a couple of great slides on this, but I think it's important from a summary perspective to look at standard and MLI select financing. And again, we're going to see some tweaks. I mean, you can look at that as a positive, you can look at that as a negative, but MLI select definitely, there's very few developments that are happening or have even happened, without that being a part of the equation. But understanding the purpose of why we have incentive-based financing with CMHC, they do attach social and environmental goals to it because that's, being a government entity, that's what they want to do. But of course, that's not the same thing when it comes to just standard financing when you get to control everything. Eligible users, well, both are options. I'm using CMHC financing, using standard financing, that can always be used at any point in time. But leverage and amortization definitely changes. You got up to, the long-term value of 85%. You've got the 95% with a 50-year amortization when you hit the 100-point level with MLI Select. So you can start to see now how there's these different options, and you need to know what the various options are to know up front the path you want to go when you build up your operating pro forma. Now, debt coverage ratios, they definitely differ. You can get as low as 1.10 when you start using CMHC. And you can get a little bit of a kick when you deal with affordable units on the standard financing side. Social outcomes, that all falls into the government side of things with CMHC, where they start to put in those affordability, those energy efficiency, environmental accessibility. Those all become part of design equations in the financing when you leverage CMHC financing. And of course, you don't have to do that when you're dealing with standard financing. Premiums on insurance based on long-term value, the term, affordability, but obviously reduced premiums with higher points and tiers are where the flexibilities come into a CMHC build out. Now, interest rates, competitive versus the advantages of MLI Select and CMHC financing, they're clearly there. And there's an application process, a little bit more lengthy, and that can be one of the negative points. But at the end of the day, that's just what it comes when you're dealing with another entity to deal with that. And what's it best for? I think that from a developer's perspective, it's very clear. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to financial sense to leverage CMHC. It just makes sense in a lot of developments. And let's face it, you probably can count on one or two hands the number of developments that may proceed without CMHC. And those tend to be with developers that have a very niche area. They know what they're building, they know who they're renting to, and they're very specific for that, but they're not the norm. Now, let's look at a couple other financial elements. This is a very important graph. We love to show this. And this is US data, I'll just tell you that, because we don't have this data, readily available here in Canada, and we don't have the data pool size to even come up with these kinds of correlations. Now, at the top of the yellow graph you see right there, that's buyer RRR targets. That's what they're targeting. In green, we see the cap rates, a very important metric. We look at doing that. And the blue represents, we'll call it interest rates, but really it's the 10-year Treasury average rate there. And the key here isn't what the values are. You can see that this runs from basically 2001, stretches out into a forecast and into Q1 27. But what's important is just look at the trajectory. There's not a one-to-one correlation. Mathematically, it's actually a little over 0.6. But what you can see is the trajectory, upwards and downward trends, the impact of interest and what you can foresee on cap rates, which then translates into IRRs. And you can see that there is a correlation. They're not exact. In fact, the gray graph represents the difference between the two, but there's always some element of spread. And these are important when it comes to those metrics. And US data is fantastic to use when you're looking for confidence, when you're looking for a projection. And the Witten Institute provides this, and we're excited to at least have access to this data. Now, I just want to just talk a little bit about Rock Advisors, just tell you a little bit about this, because as I promised at the outset, we want to give you a place to go, because even when it comes to Q&A, well, you probably only want to have general answers to questions you would ask. But if you've got specific questions about you, your company, your development, your ideas, your thoughts, you're going to want some one-on-one, and that's going to be important. Now, what we do is 100% rental apartments. You can see the services that we do, everything from land and feasibility. We've got a large feasibility team. We do a lot of consulting, and I'll show you how this unveils throughout the entire development timeline. Even the lease up, and at the end of the day, many of our clients will sell their buildings, and the other half of our clients, they keep their buildings to develop a portfolio. And we service basically all those rental spaces, which do include, offshoot elements like student housing and affordable and conversions and so forth. And I guess the best way to summarize what we do is we pride ourselves on being the developer of developers. We translate our intellectual property, our intellectual knowledge into our clients so that they can learn and build their repertoire, and they can do it again, they can do it again, they can do it again. Because what we deliver is something we call the apartment development full service experience. And you can see it moves from land to feasibility to financial modeling, finding the money, actually finding that money to fund the project, build the capital stack, or even what to do with the money after a building sells, right? Optimizing design, the marketing plan, the lease up and revenue management as you fill up and stabilize that building. And then, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, that may involve a sale of a building before they move on to the next project, or the keeping of the asset and then moving on to the next project. So we spend our time in all nine of these areas. Four of them dominate, obviously, research, private equity, lease up, and brokerage. And I'll just share a little bit about this because, as you would do in a condo project, doing your planning up front, your feasibility is an important step. But it gets magnified in the rental space because now all of a sudden you're not getting your money up front, you're not pre-selling, and you have to be sure that you build is the right building to have when the building is done and you're ready to rent it out. And that's why we answer these 5 key questions. Should you even build? Where should you build? What should you build? How much should you build? And does the deal work out? And this involves, unit size and mix, the target demographics of the renter, but you want confidence in this. And and that's what we pride ourselves. A lot of our clients come to us from this phase in the development process. Private equity is an interesting conversation because we help a lot of our clients. Most of our clients are private apartment developers, and we actually connect them with development opportunities both in Canada and south of the border because our clients understand apartment development, and the best place they feel to put their money in from an investment perspective is in an industry that they have confidence in, an industry that they have knowledge in. And so we do a lot of that work with our clients to, what are you going to do with the money when you sell the building? That's one aspect of the question. So that's why private equity is also a part of what we do as well. Now, lease up is a big phase inside rental apartment development because I will share this one little insight is that often the lease up component is thought of in depth too late in the game, meaning that the best time to talk and start about the lease up planning is actually when the shovel goes in the ground. You should start thinking about that game plan, not when the building is 80% complete, then start thinking of leasing up. That's a mistake that a lot of rookie developers will fall into. But this is the equivalent of your pre-sale in condo, but in real time for stabilizing a building. And there are a lot of strategies to maximize the value of your asset when you are targeting the renter and managing the rents in your building. Very, very important. And a good way to hammer that home is this simple equation. Why do rents matter? On one hand, you may have someone thinks, I just want to get my building filled up because I just want to, sell it. I just want to move on to the next project, whatever it may be. But in doing that just in mono vision and only thinking about filling it up, you could leave a lot of money on the table. And when you look at this question, or you look at this equation, the way it's presented, is that just a $100 increase in rent over 12 months and a 5% cap rate is $24,000 in value you give up if you give rents short shrift. And that's why rents becomes very important. That's why rent management during the lease up cycle is very important. And where and how you rent your units, strategies are very, very important. And if you want to think about what governs all of that, what sits on top of that, these are 4 factors that drive your rent from a macro perspective. You probably get this: location, the unit size and design, the amenities. It's going to be a big one you're going to hear a lot about today. Amenities play a different game in rental than they do in condo. And a property management platform and strategy are very, very important post development, particularly if you're keeping the building and setting it up to add value if you're going to be selling the building. Now, lastly, when we talk about selling the building, we also are involved with brokerage. We serve our clients to allow them to do that through us as well. We've been involved in some of the largest transactions in Canada when it comes to rental apartments, and we're very proud about that. But many of our clients keep their buildings. Many of our clients, we will sell many buildings for them over the course of times. In a lot of cases, we're working with sons and grandsons of developers that Derek had early day relationships with. And I'll end my space up like this. I want to point you in a direction that if you want to dive into one of these topics along the development timeline, if you want to ask some personal questions because it's relating to money, or do you have the right spot, the right land that can attract the right demographic for the building you're entertaining? Dave Price is the person you can reach out to. There's a QR code where you can connect directly with Dave. And if you forget all that, just go to the Rock Advisors website and you can connect with Dave there. So that's my introduction to the condo pivot to rental. What I want to do is turn things on over here to Mansoor, and he can dive into some design elements and some real case studies. So Mansoor, I'm going to pass the baton over to you.
Thanks, Rod. Really appreciate all the insights you've provided. Folks, I'm going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes looking at rentals from a very different perspective, mostly related to design considerations. The project that you just saw on the screen is actually called Relief. It's in Ottawa, and there's a grand opening tomorrow. It's a two-tower rental project that's just completed, and our clients will main and main with Westdale Properties, and we're excited to see this project complete. It's looking terrific. If you're in Ottawa, check it out. Let's go to the next one. I'll tell you a little bit about us. I see some familiar names on the screen. It's good to see those names. So for those of you who don't know us, we're Arcadis. We are a very large multidisciplinary firm, headquartered in the Netherlands, but a very, very deep history in Canada and in Toronto in particular. Arcadis recently, well, soon becoming not so recently, 3 years ago, acquired IBI Group, which was founded in Toronto in 1974. So we've been involved in the residential market in Toronto for decades. And you can see some key facts about our firm on the left-hand side. We are currently ranked as the second largest architectural firm in the world. One of our core expertises in Toronto is what we've branded as living. Let's go to the next slide, please. Our involvement in projects obviously runs the entire life cycle of the design process and beyond, in many instances into operations and management. But the plan piece, right at the time where Rod talked about, should you build, what should you build? Uh, we get involved in some of those early feasibility studies from the point of view of site evaluation and things like that, and just understanding who your target audience is, helping you formulate program and curate sort of a vision and an experience for the project specific to the particular site that you're looking at, much before we start drawing plans. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, in terms of the Arcadis architecture and urbanism practice, which I lead globally, we actually practice in many, many areas. They're listed here: placemaking, education, government, civic, etc. The key one there is living, which happens to be our largest practice group. We have about 400 professionals across Canada working in the living space. And living is broadly defined. Next slide, please. Is broadly defined as encompassing all aspects of living, which are multifamily, seniors living, condos, student housing, resorts, hospitality. And if you were to go to, I think, the next slide, what you'd see is, yeah, the next one, please. Next. That's, yeah, there you see a bit of our experience about, sorry, just back there. the map, about 250 completed projects across Toronto. And now I'll talk a little bit about that process that I referred to earlier. Because Rod said one of the key slides was condo is not rental. And I can't agree with that more. Next slide, please. So condo is not rental, and the way we come at condo design is also not, sorry, at rental design is also not the same way that we come at condo design. Our rental design traditionally has been much more focused with a real effort to understand who the end user is. Obviously, rentals are way, way more end user focused than condos tend to be. Condos try to be a catch-all. We're grabbing students and investors and condo sort of living folks and trying to accommodate all of them in one sort of standardized product. Rental is different. You're targeting a demographic, you're targeting an audience, depending on the neighborhood, depending on the context that you're in, and you're trying to understand what their user preferences are. So in the past, we've actually run focus groups, and I just want to show you that's the sort of pre-planning stage I was referring to earlier. Let's go to the next one, please. I just want to show you some of the considerations. When we look at size, we're looking at who we're designing for, right? Whether it's an upscale millennial, or a single with a better budget, or young families, couples, empty nesters. We really try to understand who the audience is here, not just, an investor product at a price point, right? And then tailor the experience for that particular target demographic. Next slide, please. So the focus group as an example, and the comments that you're seeing here are real user comments that we've heard back in these focus groups, uh, and that statement under bedroom, I don't need room to dance around. That's real feedback where people basically said that the bedroom itself can be modestly sized. They don't need room to dance around. But what they really were saying is they're looking for good storage, good closet space, because, if you go and look at condos today, the closet space is kind of minimal to none, right? 3 feet, 3.5 feet, and that's it. Well, you can't really live, comfortably in that as a young couple renting a 600 square foot one bedroom apartment, which is roughly what this plan represents, right? A cone of vision. It's really important to understand that we're not selling condo rentals on paper like we sell condos. Rental is all about the experience. It's about how you feel when you walk into that unit for the first time, because you start formulating images immediately in your head. Can I see myself living here? And there's something really special about being able to walk into a space and not encounter a dark tunnel or a corridor that you have to wind around to get to a principal space, but to be able to see light. There's brightness, there's warmth, there's a lot of things that attract you to the space. And so seeing that kind of cone of light is really important when we design these units. So a good sense of arrival. Let's go to the next slide, please. More feedback. We asked people, would you rather have more counter space, or do you want a double sink? The feedback was, more counter space would be nice. I cook. I'm always in the kitchen. It's a social space. which means an island would be great. So, friends and family can hang out around the island while I'm cooking. So obviously we factor that in. We incorporate sink covers, which de facto give you a little more counter space, and they give you a dual sink as an example. Little touches, that I don't know that we go that far when we're thinking about some of our condos. Let's go to the next one, please. I would give up space in the bedroom for more closet space. I talked about that. This was an interesting one. I don't want to showcase my junk. We don't think about, where do you store the vacuum cleaner? Where do you store the brooms? Where do you store your bikes? So in this particular unit, which is a real example, it's actually built, we designed the equivalent of a gear wall. The stuff you have in your garage with the slotted wall where you can just hang stuff. It's a very simple addition, right, to your laundry room. And if you can just widen that laundry room by a foot or two, and create a gear wall, you'll be amazed as to how much junk you can store there or keep there that's not visible to A, yourself when you live in the space, and B, to visitors. Let's go to the next slide. Obviously, unit layouts with a high degree of efficiency are great. I personally love this layout. I think it's fantastic. You've got a central living space with split two bedrooms. You have bed bath parity. You have as many bathrooms as you have bedrooms. So in an instance like this, where you have two renters, you're not forcing them to share a bathroom. You've got a kitchen with a great island, social space. You've got your laundry room with adequate storage, room for a gear wall opposite that washer, or you can see the gear wall on the left-hand side in that case. Uh, like it's really efficient, really well laid out, right? And if you look closely, you'll notice the washroom opposite the laundry room has a door through that closet space, so it acts as a semi-ensuite, right? You can come at it from the living space or from the bedroom. Both the bedrooms have walk-through closets which connect. Like it's just a super efficient and great layout. And you see the light when you walk right in, right? Through to the balcony. Next slide. So, these are just renditions. I think at this point we're just showing off our rendering skills, but really what you're seeing is a layout that really works, that takes into consideration some of the feedback that we've heard from these focus groups. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, we can keep going and really sort of maximizes space. Now, if you go back and read the deck, you'll read that as a design firm, we have some key considerations. We love data. We love to agglomerate data. We focus on sustainability, and we use technology where we can in our work. This is data that we've agglomerated from at least 75 to 80 completed rental projects, right? And this represents some recent projects that are either in design or in construction. So 3450 Dufferin, you would know that project. I imagine it's the Fitzrovia project by Yorkdale Mall, Three Towers. KIP 3 is Concert Properties, Block in Etobicoke. Block 8 is Oxford at Square One. High Park, GWL. 100 Broadway is Reserved, Livermore, GWL. 203 Jarvis Tour that we just opened, the Tour Hotel. And what you're seeing here is the heights. These are not overly ambitious large projects. Most of them are in the mid to high 30s or low 40s. We're not doing 60, 70, 80-story rental towers. So you've got to think of, how much can you put out in one shot. The unit count you can see there. You can see the mix of units and the kinds of amenities, and what we see when we agglomerate this data is trends. You see very few projects. There's two projects that have pools in them. And what you'll see is that those two projects are both multi-tower projects. Like High Park Village is 3 towers, 35, 11, and 30 stories. Dufferin is 30, 28, and 24 stories. They can really average down the operating cost of a pool. It's a very expensive amenity to have if you're managing a modest kind of 200 unit or 250 unit project. There's maintenance required, there's repairs required, and there's ongoing operating costs. A gym is almost a must have, and we see it in every single project. Interestingly, we see yoga and spin rooms and meeting rooms in every single project. And we also see games rooms and party rooms as we do private dining and kids space. So it gives you a sense of what the more popular amenities are versus pools and theaters, which are, in a few of our projects. So we like to gather this data, which helps, at least inform our clients and give them a sense of awareness of what we've done in previous projects, and hopefully it's giving you some insights. Next slide, please. Just a list of those 75 or 80 completed projects that all contribute to the glimpse of the data that I showed you. Let's go to the next one, please. So Ben Gerard, we finished this project for GWL a little while ago, and I just want to use some kind of build case studies to highlight, important aspects of some of these projects. I really believe that with rentals, having a strong street level presence, strong sense of arrival, focus on great quality, durability of these buildings becomes really, really important. Remember, durability and quality equals low operating cost, less things breaking down, less maintenance, less repairs. And so, yes, there's a bit more upfront capital investment, but if you do it smartly, uh, it pays back in spades. The ground level experience at Bain Gerard, we have a drive-through, we have a great lobby presence. You see that sawtooth kind of lobby, all glass on the ground floor, and the image on the left. We actually gave up the corner to retail so we can maximize retail presence. Let's go to the next slide, please. And yeah, that's a close up of the lobby. We did some fun public art with those snowmen, which really attract kids. It becomes a little community attraction. They decorate it over the holidays, etc. Uh, so the lobby becomes memorable, easy drop off with the private driveway, retail visibility at the corner. And this is not a dinky little lobby that you pass through. I really believe that it's important that the common spaces in rental projects foster community. They build a sense of pride and they allow people, the community, to develop and get to know each other. The more people are engaged with their neighbors, they become friends, their kids become friends, the less likely they are to leave, the less turnover you have, the less kind of break in your revenue. So, there's a design consideration there of fostering community that actually leads to kind of the economic success of these projects, right? Next slide, please. So you can see here, we did a lobby that feels great. It's warm, it's generous, it's engaged. It makes you feel great when you come here. You feel really proud to say that I live at this address, right? You can see the unit sizes that we did here. Admittedly, this was a while ago. We're not doing 1,600 square foot 3 bedrooms anymore. But I also want to say with rentals, we're not doing 700 and 750 square foot 3 bedrooms either. So there's a happy medium, and we've got to find that. Next slide, please. So the other thing I want to emphasize is elevatoring. In the world of condos, we've really pushed the boundaries lately. We've gone to 130, 140 units per elevator as a rule of thumb. And I think that's problematic. With rental, you really can't afford to. Most of our rental clients are very, very particular of 1 to 100. One elevator per 100 units. And, in this instance, this is about a 600 unit project or 550 unit project. And we did 6 elevators. Think about it. The move in, move out happens, in a pretty condensed time frame and at regular intervals. And that really compromises your elevator service. So you don't want to be in that situation. And so we advocate for 1 to 100 over here. You'll also notice that in this instance, there's one unit with an inside bedroom, unlike condos where inside bedrooms are kind of the norm. But here's the thing, and you can see that unit. It's, beside the upper stack. Yeah, there you go. Thanks for pointing it out. If you really look closely at that unit, we could have done the bedroom on the outside wall. We actually intentionally did it on the inside wall because in that instance, it was to provide a purchaser with a wide, shallow living space with a huge expanse, 20 feet or 22 feet of glass, right? It's just a different experience versus kind of a deep, narrow living space. So it was more about creating a diversity of experience of that living space than stuffing a bedroom in the back. Inside bedrooms, in our experience, you won't see too many of them in rental units. You will also notice in this plan an abundance of storage and closet space. You'll see many units here with walk-in closets. And so, there's a generosity of space. There's a real focus and attention on livability. If you look at that unit beside the stair, you'll see how by combining the closet and the laundry space, we've actually created a utility room. And frankly, you get much more out of that space doing that versus a tiny sort of coat closet and a tiny laundry space, right? From a livability perspective. Let's go to the next slide. Some of the amenities, like I said, the amenities have to feel great here. In this case, that bottom left image, we actually stuck the lounge halfway up the building on the 22nd or 23rd floor. And the reason for doing that is you have these incredible views of downtown Toronto. So we got above all the buildings that were south of us, and we put the amenities at a point where even if you were living on a lower floor facing north, you could bring your friends and family here and hang out in this great space and enjoy this incredible view and location, right? Versus, on the fourth floor facing kind of Gerard and another building across the street. So it was about sort of creating an equal experience for all of the residents. And in doing that, once again, bringing people out of their homes, fostering community. Pet friendliness is huge. We're seeing huge pet populations in these rental apartment buildings. So that's another key consideration. Next slide. 3450 Dufferin, the project that we just finished for Fitzrovia. Now, what's interesting in this building, and I'm sure many of you have noticed it, is there's no balconies here. We have 0 projecting balconies in this entire development of 3 towers, right? So we have close to 800 units with no balconies. Actually, that really contributes to optimizing your facade. It reduces your maintenance. Balconies are the first thing that deteriorate on the exterior of the building. And the way units have gone these days, getting smaller and smaller, they've become de facto outdoor storage spaces. And they just look unattractive from the outside because of all the junk that people end up storing there. And in a rental situation, you can't afford these buildings not looking great at all times, right? You want people to look at these buildings and say, I wonder, if those guys have an apartment, what a great looking development. So design really matters. By the way, the less penetration you have in your building facade, the more energy efficient your building is, which means, again, less heating and cooling costs, less load on your mechanical system, less sort of opportunity for mechanical failure equals less operating cost. So there is a correlation there. Let's go to the next slide, please. So again, you see a project with 240 units that has 3 elevators, right? So back to that idea of 1 per 100 or less. You're also noticing that most of these buildings have kind of more of a slab-like form, slightly more efficient from a layout perspective. You'll notice the all outside bedrooms, split 2 bedrooms. If you look right opposite that elevator core, it's almost like the unit I showed you earlier that we rendered with the center hall, with the split 2 bedrooms, with 2 bathrooms, and island, a laundry room as opposed to a laundry closet where you can store some of your utilities. Just great kind of living opportunities, right? And you can see the unit sizes, you know, a 1 bedroom that's 590 square feet, 2 bedrooms approaching 900 square feet, and 3 bedrooms approaching 1,000 square feet. So definitely larger than the standards we deployed for condos. Next slide, please. This is the mix. We don't need to dwell on it. We can go past it. Now, we've also done instances where we've combined condo and rental. And, you know, from a look perspective, they don't need to look different. But obviously, the unit mix and all of those things start to vary. I'm going to speed it up. Let's keep going to the next slide and the next. We can go past this. Again, an example of condo and rental. Now, you know, there are some things obviously in the rental part of the development that you need that you don't need in the condo, like a management office, like a rental office, and things like that, which occur at kind of grade level or 1 level above. And it's sort of important to have those considerations, which we don't tend to provide in condos. Next. Yeah, we can skip past the floor plans. Yep, let's go to the next one. Now, so we've talked a lot about rental sort of standalone development. We've also been doing a lot of rental intensification. 765 Steels is one example where you know it is an existing site that Starlight owns. You see their rental apartment building in the background with the signature sort of darker tops. And we actually did an infill there. You know, closer to the street, we added a second rental building, which obviously maximizes their utilization of the site and increases their yield from an existing property with obviously low sort of investment in land. It's just maximizing the land opportunity. Next slide. And again, you know, how do you do that? How do you make sure that the building in the back doesn't lose its visibility, doesn't lose its appeal? In all of these instances where we've added an additional or 2 additional rental buildings to existing rental developments, it's always been about what's the win for the entire development, not just the new residents and the new tenants, but also the old ones. They've got to feel like this is great for all of us, not that, oh, there's people coming into our development that are going to have better quality of life than we do. So it's really important to have that mentality and that consideration when we think about these infill developments. Next slide. Golden Mile is a completely different situation where we've got a very low volume of rental in this entire site. And so, and you see that on the left-hand side, these 3 and 4 story apartment buildings along Creighton Drive there. And what we chose to do is kind of replace them with much more dense forms of development. And obviously, they would be brought back through the rental replacement program and what have you, but it's a different kind of win-win, right? Where they get significantly better amenities, better access to open space, better sort of updated units that they live in with all the modern kind of fixtures and fittings and what have you, and just a whole different living experience. So that's the other thing we've done quite a lot of and looked at sites where, and it goes back to those 5 questions that Rod asked earlier. Should you build? What should you build? Where? How? Etc. And it's really looking at each site on its own merits. Do you start with a clean slate? Do you demolish and rebuild? Do you add and infill? What do you do? You've got to look at all of that. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can keep going. Thank you. So I'm just going to briefly touch on the CMHC part of the funding model that Rod referenced earlier, just from a design point of view. And there are these 4 schemes: Affordable Housing Fund, Federal Land Initiative, MLI Select, Apartment Construction Loan Program, right? But there is a point-based system which focuses on picking a stream: sustainability, energy efficiency, affordability, and accessibility, and you score points depending on the stream you pick. From an accessibility perspective, what we're finding is it's driving towards larger units because the requirement is 100% of the units need to be visitable, i.e., if you have a visitor in that unit, the public portions, like the living area, a washroom, have to be accessible. And that's 100% of the units, as opposed to most buildings that we do with 10 or 15% accessible units. So this is not a fully accessible unit, i.e., the bedroom doesn't need to be accessible, but it needs to be visitable. And so that adds area. So just to know that the financing piece also has a design consideration to it that you need to take into consideration when you pick your stream. Next slide, please. So just to sum it up, there are some key differences, which I hope I've touched on all of them. Much more focus on end user orientation, larger units, better elevator ratio. I didn't touch on parking requirements, but generally we are seeing parking ratios go down. On-site management, I talked about. Sustainability, I did. Emphasis on durability, amenities equal or better than condos with emphasis on low operating costs. Dens. We don't do a lot of dens in rental units. They don't add value the way they do in condos. You're not going to get more rent just because, like, you're not going to pass off a 1+ den as at the same rental rate as a 2 bedroom, which many condo investors rent out in that kind of. We do a lot of 1+ den with 2 bathrooms, right? Here you're doing 2 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms. So dens, in our experience, don't add a lot of value. Typically in multi-tower developments, we've seen the rentals occupy the less prominent location. That might change. Better in-suite storage, and then the design implications of CMHC funding. Hopefully you got some good insights and some good design ideas from this. I'll stop there, and I'm sorry I've overshot my time here.
No, that's great, Mansoor. We really appreciate that. And I think that if there's any specific questions, I expect a lot of questions. Like whenever we've had these conversations, it's more one-on-one. But if you do have questions, pop them in the chat box, pop them in the Q&A box. We'll definitely will get Mansoor's, and we've got other people on the call here that can answer anything specifically. But maybe Mansoor, I'll just ask you a question, and if nothing else crops up, we're close to being right on target. But if you had to point in one direction. I've sensed, a lot of condo developers are already down the runway. They've already been down the runway of looking at rentals and so forth. But what would you say has been the biggest lesson learned that you've observed in a condo developer that has already pivoted to the rental space?
Well, I think it is the realization, your headline sums it up. Rental is not condo. And what I've observed very respectfully is a lot of condo developers haven't appreciated that kind of nuance difference and have gone about it like business as usual. And we've spent a lot of time um, educating or familiarizing them with our experience, having done, 75 or 80 completed rental projects in the city and what we've learned along the way. And it's been a real eye opener for many of them. Now, look, I don't profess that this is the only formula that works. We've got some clients who say, you know what, we can rent the small units faster. And so we're staying with the small unit program. Or, yeah, we hear you on elevatoring, but honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference. We can only advise based on our experience, right? But some developers have a different approach. We respect that, we accept it, and we follow their guidance at the end of the day. We're not rigid, but what I've shared with you has been the majority of our experience.
Right. Got one question here from an attendee. What to consider in design aspects if you wish to design a rental now, but wish to convert it into condos, so the other way around in the future? So he'd heard that someone had said you need to have extra space, maybe 1 foot below each unit floor for HVAC and plumbing, et cetera. Are there any design considerations when going in the other direction?
Well, if you're designing something to be a rental and wish to convert it to condo in the future, chances are you're exceeding if you follow the model that I showed you, you're doing equal or better than condos. So from a standard and a fit and finish and quality perspective, you're ahead of the curve. The question is going to be, are you going to get the same return through sales that you would have gotten in a traditional condo? I'm not the
Yeah.
expert, I can't answer that. But I haven't heard this kind of theory about an extra foot below each floor for HVAC. Ceiling heights do matter. We don't do too many rentals with 8 feet. We have done 8 foot six, interestingly, which is kind of neither here nor there. It's not 8 foot and it's not 9, but 8 feet you really feel. We advocate for 9 feet clear in these units. But I have seen quite a few 8 foot six, I have to say.
Yeah. And one last question so we can keep everybody on time. Maybe you can just elaborate a little bit further on the visible units. I have a feeling that, the question was, would the whole unit except bedroom utility room need to be barrier free? But I believe the accessibility is more width of doorways and pass bys of islands and things of that nature. Is that
Correct.
what
And
you're
the, and
referring
the
to?
principal living space, I mean, think about it. When you have a visitor in your unit, right, where would they go? Right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a common sense approach to, where you enter the unit, if you get past the kitchen, the living space, if you need to use the washroom, it's that kind of thing, right? And
Yeah.
and obviously the accessibility standards in the common areas of buildings, they already apply.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's 2 o'clock, Mansoor. Thank you so much for sharing today. I think there's been a wealth of information. Again, this recording will be on the landing page. You'll receive an email with the abilities and the link to do that. But thank you, Mansoor. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you making the time.